Welcome back to Sean's Thoughts After Hours. If you haven't already heard of one of these podcasts, After Hours is a podcast where I take Sean's thoughts to, a stream of consciousness that is more just essentially allowing to talk about anything, not necessarily wondering or worrying about what I get back to. It's kind of a stream of consciousness, you could kind of say. And just so, we're fully clear, if you did watch that video of that box, and you'll know which one I'm talking about, yes, all precautions were taken, just before, people start worrying. And right off the bat, I want to start this After Hours podcast episode, just talking about a few things that have come across my mind with regards to, doing what I'm doing safety. Like things that would be helpful. I know there's a lot of videos out there that'll give a lot of tips, but I thought I would share some of the insights there or the experiences that I've had and realized. And so earlier today, when I was doing a podcast, I was talking about, being out in the wilderness and essentially where I am. I'm not in a registered campground. There's no cell service. You can kind of say that I am really out there when it comes to where I'm at. And even, these areas generally have campers, especially in this time of the year. But yet I walked up and down this area and there's no one here tonight. So essentially means that me, myself, and I are the sole inhabitants. Not necessarily inhabitants, because there's definitely a lot of wildlife around me. I'm sure the bats will come out soon. And anyways, so yeah, as I was talking about that, just getting back to my train of thought, I talked about placing tents and ensuring to place them out of the way of paths, seen and unseen, animal paths, human paths, regardless. Like, always try to avoid building your tent on a path that could have animals walking upon it. Another thing that I realized I had learned is where my tent is generally closest to one side, or as much of one side being essentially guarded. And in the sense that I mean right here is, if you looked at the video today that I did on journeys, I showed that my tent was on the side of the bank. So therefore, having animals in this environment is going to be less of a chance, because I'm not like sitting in the middle of everything. And so I'm on the side, and I have my chair where I'm sitting right now. I also have it on the side with the back facing the river. You can have it the other way around too, but the idea is that right now, while I sit here doing this podcast, I'm looking at everything on the other side of the camp, and then my back is to the water. That the odds of having anything walking down there, because it's a rocky landscape and such, is going to be considerably lower. So it's the positioning of my chair, which is important. And yeah, I don't know if this is necessarily important, but right now I'm watching the remnants of a junk fire. I actually just went around and I picked up all of the litter and debris and stuff and put it together with a few pine cones in order to create my own junk fire. A way to clean up the camp without having to actually take the garbage. Actually, I did clean up a lot of the garbage, as I'd mentioned earlier today, and even more so for this fire, because I did go to all the other camps that were nearby to see if they had any leftovers. And that includes, when there's a fire, people will often water down what's left of the fire, leaving chunks of wood in there, chunks of burnt, ashy wood. And so I collected those to help essentially burn those down as well. So we're essentially leaving a better place when I came than when I came. Anyways, my cousin always taught me, or didn't taught me, he was the first one to coin the phrase for me: when you visit someplace, leave it better than when you arrived. And so me, kind of like this whole idea of burning the trash, and that's the video that we're watching right now. And there's a reason behind that we're watching that as a video, because this particular podcast, After Hours, was set for exclusivity, not because I wanted to, just because they were originally just audios. And so I can release just audios on that platforms. Oh, sorry. They were exclusive to Apple and Spotify and Audible because they were an audio only platform for what I was doing my podcast on. So I created these as a bonus. And so now that I'm being challenged with my podcast hosting, because, you know, one obstacle after another obstacle keeps coming at me. And so right now I'm locked out of my podcast hosting program because of all those obstacles that keep coming at me. And this one has to do with money, but it has to do with money of, you know, the solution now is pay for the whole entire year, which is like $400 more US, like a little more than $400 USD for the whole year. And I can just pay that all at one time, or I have to lose all that work that I put into putting it up on Podbean. And Podbean is a pretty amazing app when it comes from, or a hosting platform when it comes for creating a podcast, because that you have the ability to put up a video on YouTube as part of your social media interface and create your video series to be a podcast. And then when you put it on there, it automatically goes on to Podbean. And then from Podbean, it's distributed towards a lot of amazing different podcast channels, such as Apple and Spotify and Audible and Boom Player and a whole bunch of other ones. But it's a pretty remarkable way to reach you, whoever it is that's listening right now. And like I said, unfortunately, I'm not able to put this particular one up on there. And so therefore I'll keep it as a video with this little small fire of garbage burning. You know, it's really interesting. Earlier today, I did a podcast by the river. Actually, by the same river I am now, but this one is just, 40 kilometers away kind of thing. Or 20. Yeah, about 25. Anyways, it's downriver from here. And it's interesting that my vibration or my energy level, the amount of negativity that I was holding on to was larger, like more of like, why me? And it's interesting as I return to this particular spot where this is where I first did my first sleeping outside by myself situation. Off grid, off cell phone, off everything. And actually, tonight is the first night where there's no other neighbors. There's always been neighbors. But just to get myself comfortable with the area, I actually walked the entire area, the perimeter of this area. So I'm kind of very familiar with what's where. And maybe that's another tip that we could add to this whole thing that I'm just suddenly became aware of. I did that naturally. I didn't even think about it. I walked around to the other campsites to collect any debris that they had, or garbage, essentially, paper garbage. Didn't burn any plastic. I actually wrapped all that up in a bag that was already here as part of what someone left, and then put that out on the highway. Like, that's the best place for it. Garbage people can come and get that, perhaps, and it'll be more away from the animals, I guess. I don't know. I need to think about that, but it's definitely better to be away from me. That would be a good start. And yeah, so anyways, yeah, so what After Hours is like I said, it's just me kind of, after everything's done, just sitting somewhere. And in most of the previous ones, I was sitting somewhat similar as I am now, except for in all those ones, there was no campfire. This is the first one that I've done by a campfire, and that's obviously what you're seeing. And yeah, Oh yeah, that's where I was. So that energy was considerably lower. But when I arrive here, it's really interesting how the energy just feels better. The potential, the possibility of everything that I foresee, being a part of one day. And I don't say perhaps, I know because that's what I want. And I feel that truly knowing what your wants are, not necessarily demanding they happen, but truly knowing what they are, I think really can maybe help wonders in manifesting that stuff. Because as I've talked about before, we often don't necessarily notice things after like when we're in it. We might notice it after, kind of just like what I just did with the walking the perimeter. I did that without even knowing. I just naturally did that, and I did it for a different reason, but it all kind of flowed together. And then I realized, oh, that's a good thing to do if you're out in nature, is to walk that perimeter, to know where everything is at, and to have the experience of being there. And I guess the other positive thing would be if there were other campers in the area, you'd run into them and you'd be able to meet them as well. And I guess that's kind of one of the things that maybe I need to do more often, is be more open to meeting people and having engaging conversations with them. But on the flip side, though, being out here within nature, without all that electronic interference that you get from the Wi-Fi, from all of the things you plug into a wall, to all of the Bluetooth devices going off and the sirens. And, for me, even living in my supersized town, there was the crying of people in the street sometimes, or the yelling and screaming, which probably was paying louder than the crying. If you think about it, which one is louder? Which one's more challenging? The crying, for whatever reason they were crying, or the yelling and screaming in anger? Because, yeah, like I said, it's a really different and invigorating feeling not to have all that. And then also the other thing, not having people's counter intentions. That's, I think, a very powerful not to have. And it's not that counter intentions are brought on because people are malicious. It's just a natural thing for many people, or even our programming, to be unhappy for another person because we reflect upon ourselves. Like we see the reflection of ourselves, and if we're not where we want to be, when we see someone else reaching for where they want to be, and even if it's right or wrong, but just the actual act of doing it and actually sometimes going after it, people have feelings about that. And when we're spending energy perhaps on those negative emotions about someone else's situation, simply because we might hold some jealousy or envy or misunderstanding or miscommunication with that person, or even if that person didn't want you to succeed, then when they succeeded, you felt bad about it because they were holding you back. Yeah, there's so many different ways that we can let things hold us back. So, as I said, focusing on more of not only what you want, but being able to actually physically speak it into existence. I think that that's of the utmost importance. Yeah. There's so many different experiences that I want to experience. I realize that for me, it's not the experience of ownership that I want. So a lot of people, they want to buy a house and they want to buy a car and they want to buy things. They want to own more things. Yet for me, I see the whole reason of utilizing currency would be to utilize it to have experiences. And that's kind of where all of my blueprints come from, because these are things that I would like to experience with people like building these things, not necessarily staying there forever, to build a healing center, to work with the people, to help, even from hammering to planning to, whatever it is that my skill set can bring to it. And then when people are there that love being there, and it doesn't need any more creating in it, and it's just simply a healing center, maybe to occasionally visit in the future, but to leave it in the hands of people who want to operate it to the bestest of their abilities and create it as whatever it is they would like to see it become. Yeah, it's definitely important to be fully aware of what you want. And I'm learning more and more every day about what I want. Like learning about what I would believe my type to be, and learning, what I would like to see around me, to have around me, the energies that I would rather have around me. Obviously, at this moment in time, right now, is the energy of nature, of the fire that's cooling out, of the whitewater rapids in the behind me, of the dusk-covered sky, and the little sparkle of the crackling of the fire. And so, obviously, with all that, that's the average of the reality, or the energy within the reality that I would love. But honestly, when I think about it, I would rather there be 4 or 5 more tents here. I would rather there be a small, like, whether it's Ash and his friends, or, just a group of people, a small group of people, just, sharing energy. They say that you are the average of the 5 people, like your energy is the average of the 5 people that you spend the most time with. So when you look out into your world, well, if you're spending time with people majorly who are talking you out of your dreams, or telling you all their sob stories, and you're telling them all your sob stories, like, you're definitely going to be the average of the ones you spend the most time with. And so, I guess in a sense, I'm out here in the forest because the forest's energy is the average that I would like to feel. Not necessarily be, but I do realize that moving forward, as more and more people start to reach for something more than what they have, that there is going to be, will be, maybe already is, more energies that are going to start amassing and coming together because they recognize the call to be more, that they are already more. That's kind of like the information that I get from the Paul Selig books, is that we are already more than we were allowed to know about ourselves. And when I say ourselves, I guess it's possibly that I'm talking about you as well. See, I can't speak for anyone about who and what they believe themselves to be, but I get the feeling from all of my, we'll call it training, that we are far more than we give ourselves credit for. Just looking behind me, I was hearing some noise, but, for all I know, that's like a whole bunch of people that are beyond the veil of what I can see, and they're all huddled up there, surprised or listening to what I'm saying. And maybe that's the noise that I'm hearing, is some vibration that's breaking through the veil. I often wonder, what are things going to be perceived as when we aren't all bound to a collective agreement about so many things that has been manipulated continuously, maybe forever, or not forever, but for a very long time. What are things going to start looking like? What will a tree look like? What will Yeah, what will a tent look like? What will dirt look like? What will everything look like? What will be the path forward look like? See, I kind of envision being in the moment of now is that the path before you is perhaps even changing, like being able to see the different ways forward, the different options for every step we take, the different potentials that weave out from that. Maybe not in the individual step, but at least, yeah, I don't know. I get the understanding that every move forward, we're making a choice. And in a sense, when we have a choice, there's a branch in the timeline or in the experience potential of A or B or however many choices we have. So, yeah, I can kind of see an idea of maybe of being able to like all the realities in his step forward or possible spaces in front of him, they're shifting depending upon choices. Yeah, I don't know. It's hard to explain, but I can kind of see it. Maybe, I don't know, maybe this is a lot of after hours. So, yeah, I'm going to leave it right there. Honestly, what had happened was I started seeing it and I'm trying to describe that shifting, but I can get it definitely because in video games, you know, they sometimes showed a portal or something, and in the portal, the other side of the portal kept changing depending on where the portal was going to take them, and it was shifting constantly. And so I can kind of visualize it with that as how we walk forward. Is that it's almost as if through a portal we can see the different possible potentials, different areas, perhaps in their shifting as if it was a portal. But anyways, I'm confusing myself again. I'm going to let you go. I'm probably going to turn in for the night. I love just lying here and listening. So, yeah. Thank you so much for sharing your time and attention with me. And this has been Sean's Thoughts After Hours, number 7 or 8. I'm not sure.